Well, I don't remember. It's possible that they have a farm structure.
That's not new development. And ag development is not
Wouldn't
included
count for
in
this,
this.
yeah. I don't know, I don't really.
So the 60,000 square feet is not ag development.
Right, it's not what's shown as far as all the species.
They're using it as
When you turn it off.
poison for the project. And then a stack.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah. Can't say that until Trevor came here. Yeah. They're socially distant, so.
Lucky me. You don't know what I think about. Oh, they're all over there. It's, some of them.
Yeah, I'm rather frustrated.
That's where you sit.
This one. The first one.
What happened to the?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't forgot their names. They could be given to me.
Yeah, so that'd be 24,000 square feet.
So that's 24, so another 20, so we're still like.
Yeah, but then you get the, like, the guest house. You would have had the maximum every possible structure. You know, the max, could be close to 60.
It's like
I don't think 6,000 square feet is 700 acres.
Call tonight's planning commission meeting to order. We do have a quorum. And our first item on the agenda I'd like a motion to approve the agenda. The only item I would propose to change, to take off item 5, there seems to be a couple issues if somebody wants to discuss further. Can I get a proposal? Can I get a motion? Get a motion to adjust the agenda.
I'm going to readjust the agenda to item 5 to the next meeting.
Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approve the minutes of the June 17th meeting. Any issues? If not, can I get a motion to approve?
I make a motion that the June 17th meeting be approved as written.
Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are going to review tonight, Mr. Webb is going to explain to us about the zoning ordinance for the floodplain management regulation, Article 11 in the Madison County zoning ordinance. Mr. Webb?
Yes, thank you. So floodplain ordinance, there's sort of 3 parts. That is the actual ordinance itself, which in Madison is in the zoning ordinance. Sometimes in some communities it's a standalone ordinance, but in Madison it's in zoning. And I'd say at least half the communities, that's where the floodplain ordinance is actually in the zoning. So to amend it, we go through a process sort of like with anything in the zoning ordinance. So you have the actual ordinance itself, then you have the study, it's called FIS. I did put that online. And then you have the actual, kind of where the rubber meets the road is the actual map, floodplain map. And if you read the report, it has, I think, expanded from a new study that was completed. I think our old map is 2007 or somewhere around that time. So this floodplain map does expand floodplain areas, identify floodplain areas through the FIS. We have about 40 policies in Madison, which is, I don't know, a whole bunch. But there are some, I guess the only question I was having, we don't know this answer, is how many people maybe that weren't in the floodplain, I'm talking about structures, mainly dwelling, that are now in the floodplain. I don't really know that. I would suspect there might be a couple, potentially not. So far, nothing hasn't been pointed out to us. We did did send letters out to about 1,800 property owners a few months ago. Basically, the changes, and I said this in the report, are pretty pro forma. They're just what the state is requiring us to put in the zoning ordinance. It's nothing groundbreaking. You can still build in a floodplain, and our building official is clear about this. You just have to follow the specific construction regulations for floodplain construction. So we're not in any way saying you can't build a floodplain, but it's just as it was before, you have to follow those construction practices as required by the floodplain ordinance that the building official enforces. Any questions? I know this is not really a hearing for this, but just want to, again, this is, again, just for the public. The Planning Commission has always allowed people to kind of treat these workshops as hearings. That's great, but just, as far as this goes, I don't think people are here for floodplain ordinance, so I have to guess. But if there are any questions for me as far as this, or Jamie and I have talked about it for months now. It does need to be adopted before September in order to participate in this flood insurance program. So we don't have a lot of choice. Any questions?
Any questions from the Planning Commission?
Look, I got one. Now that you have a piece of property, it could have been A1, C1, whatever it could have been, and now that piece of property is in floodplain, does that do anything to the tax base of that property?
That's a good question. If you from a market standpoint, yes. And the value, especially based on market value. So if your house was not in the floodplain, and that it is, I would put it back to commercial revenue. That's a good question, Brian, but I would say if we're basing our taxes on market value and we formally trained as an appraiser, it's a difference, yes, no question.
Anybody else?
Yes, I have one question. Mr. Webb, how much interest, I know this is a public hearing, but how much interest have you had on this? I mean, this is a workshop.
Months ago, we've got a lot of calls. Folks were basically want to know, well, it's changed and what's going on. Has it moved up to, encompass my house now? The 20 or 30 people that I talked to, there were no to very minor changes in their old map and new map. But I think if you look online at GIS and compare the two, you will see that it's expanded. I mean, so maybe the 20 or 30 people I talked to, that's just the way it was, but I do believe that it's an expansion. You can challenge that, but it's a lengthy, complicated process, inexpensive.
Anybody else?
So the vote will be August 5th and it can't be challenged, is that what you're saying?
What's that?
The vote will be August 5th and it
Right,
can't be
this
challenged?
is just a review of what we're gonna, this whole meeting is just a review what we're gonna actually vote on August 5th. So that's like lots of work session. I mean, again, you're welcome to have comments on these items, but there will be no vote tonight as far as either of these items.
Anybody else in the audience have a comment on the floodplain ordinance? If not, we will move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Mr. Webb. People outside, you want to come on in and sit down? There's. All right.
I'd like to call the Board of Supervisors portion to order, just so that we can listen and kind of comment where we can. We don't have a formal agenda, but we could always work off the planning commission, turn it back over to the planning commission, just so that we're in session. Pleasure of the board.
Mr. Chairman, I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Mike, back to you.
Would y'all like to come in and find a seat or just stay out there or whatever? Okay. Next item on the agenda tonight case number SU-07-20, please. Let's keep order in the audience. Thank you. Ready? Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is case number SU-07-20-14. It's a special use permit request by Crystalus LLC for an event venue. We have read this item a couple of times in meetings, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I think everybody here is probably familiar with that. Mr. Webb, do you have anything to add to what we already know?
So, a general observation I've found working in this field for quite a long time, even subtle land use changes and records. Sometimes when you change something in someone's backyard, it's always commercial. So I understand this. When you have a large change, it's more. This is not necessarily a change at this point. It's really what we have is a proposal that has many layers of review and oversight. And I have been in touch with a lot of folks in that area and all the county that kind of explains in the process and how Madison goes through our joint hearing process and different things, how the process is here in Madison. At the end of the day, this is a citizen-led process. The 9 folks here are citizens, just like the folks who are out in the audience, trying to use their best judgment. We're citizen planners, and I think it's my job to try to help guide this process. This particular event venue, of course, was adopted a little over a year ago. Many of you might have been here a year ago. And we've had a couple changes to the ordinance since then. We now refer to it as the event venue. So event venue, rural resort, one and the same. The first thing that I do as a planner, yeah, okay, I will talk to you. We don't have a microphone, so I will talk loud. Okay.
Thank you.
So the first thing I look at in evaluating this is sort of what we call the comprehensive plan, which in Madison was adopted in 2018. In a plan, usually I wasn't here for this, but it's. I'm not very good at technology, so perfect. Hello, okay.
Much better.
Okay, perfect. So in 2018, this comp plan was completed in Madison, and every county and municipality is required to have a comp plan, and addresses a whole range of issues from housing, development areas, economic development. And one of the broad sort of, in these comp plans, they really what I would call are 10,000 feet look at things. I mean, I've never seen a comprehensive plan where it said we don't want some sort of economic development. So at 10,000 feet, I think this particular proposal obviously is something that I would look at and say, well, this is something that at least during the comprehensive plan process, the citizens have expressed an interest in this sort of tourist type industries. Again, 10,000 feet. But when you hit the ground level, the concept becomes a reality, and you're always in someone's neighborhood, and that's when it becomes emotional and the process is something that we have to trust and follow. Regarding tourism, I think we pretty much consider tourism to be a clean industry, but that does not mean it does not have peril. And I know a lot of letters and people have pointed out the noise, traffic, for instance, and noise. Environmental concerns. As many of you know, in the last few years, the state has what I would call liberalized land use in the state. We know about the breweries and vineyard exemptions in many places. There are enterprises that before would have probably gone through some pretty brutal special use permits process that are now considered to be by right. We've got several here in Madison, and you can go to Page, you can go to Culpeper, and many of these operate just by getting building permits. I do find the state code to be a little vague, and I do think it's ripe for some legal challenges, as we understand there are some going on right now.
But
But they must be smaller.
yeah, right. Let me finish and real help. Excuse me. I'll do a Q&A if it is okay. So, yeah, it is smaller. Yes. Sure. I mean, please restrain yourself. Thank you. But the good thing about this special use permit condition is that it really does give the community, the planners, the board, a broad latitude to place conditions, to take citizen feedback to the concerns, place it in their permit, put performance objectives. It can even be limited to the special use permit could be limited to the applicant themselves. So it really does give us a lot of latitude in the process that I've been kind of working with Ms. Miller. These are often sort of negotiations. We go back and forth. Hey, this is what I'm here. This is what your concerns are. How can you address this? This is what the boards have in issues of. This is what the planning commission. This is what I'm hearing from your neighbors. So the hope is to, if you think the broad concept is something that is acceptable, then try to work this down into a special use permit that hopefully everyone's happy with. And I know that's sometimes in this business is always, it's hard to achieve, but at least at the end of the day, I'd hope that the citizens in the area, again, if this were to be approved, I can at least say, this is something that's predictable. We know what's going to happen over there. We know what time they're supposed to shut off. We get an idea what kind of traffic surge we're talking about. So, for the last 2 months, this is really all I've thought about. I really am happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. So one note I will make on the actual ad, which came from the submission, Barbara had told me that we have a narrative that says 60,000 square feet of structures, permanent and temporary structures. She says that this is larger than really what she anticipates. Okay, I mean, it's always better to go.
Yeah.
It's always better to go down than go up. So I did find that number from looking at the site plan to be a little bit, I'm kind of measuring in my head, thinking this looks like more than not quite 60,000 square feet. So what we're doing now, and what I hope to do is the next week, I've talked to Ms. Miller about this, is to, after tonight, and with the comments we hear, is to work this conditions into something that is the definitive final sort of condition, that something that there might be some things that the board says, we're just going to, this is just a non-negotiable. We need this, but there might be some room that we can sort of compromise. So the few things that I will just go over, and this is in my comments to the last condition letter, which is 630. I think, and if you take some notes, I think there's been questions on the transferability. I will just make a comment that sometimes can cause issues from underwriting, and if you are working with lenders, that's not necessarily the county's concern, but if you support this project, that could be an issue. I will point out that non-transferability sometimes is a sort of a no-go for third parties that might be interested in financing or being involved. I've also made a point that I want to, kind of a clear indication that what's submitted on the site plan, which is 6 of 9 of the submittal, is the condition is that this is what it will be. There can be some minor deviations, you get in there and find some rock and you have to move a building 10, 15 feet. But basically what's being approved, regardless who carries the project forward, this is what they're going to be tied to. And that really kind of goes for all the conditions. I also have a little bit of, we have 41 total lodging units and you have 230 people. And I have mentioned this to Ms. Miller, that's somewhere around 5.5 per unit. Those are some pretty large units. Those are large as, could be 3-4 bedroom house. I don't know if that's something that's I mean, you could build modular units that large, but I just think there's a little bit disconnect between the actual occupancy and the number of units. I had also made a comment about, I think Barbara had said that golf carts, electric only, would be the mode of sort of movement around the actual site. And as far as the events, this is where it gets, this is where I believe we really have to focus a lot of attention, trying to delineate between, we have the private events, and we all know private wedding venues and event centers and common interest groups, hobby groups that might come. I say the Border Collie Association of Virginia might want to come there, just using that as an example. So those private events in sort of my sort of research tend to be smaller. I don't have the biggest concern with the private events. So I went and looked at other communities that sort of have dealt with this issue. And I think it was maybe a community in California, but I like the idea of doing a minor and major. And I won't go into, you can actually, you can read these. I think most folks have, but my thought is if you're having something at 5 o'clock on a Friday, that's maybe open to the public, and I just think about Ball Top, you have music, I don't know, maybe, maybe 75, 80 people come. That's sort of, to me, the spirit of a minor event. For a major event, we have limited to 6 in a year. And to me, the really big thing about a major event is if you're going to have, again, just sort of trying to grab a number, 750 or more, which is a pretty large event. I mean, I'm not sure what Graves' attendance are for some of their events, but to me, that's a fairly large event, and it might not be achieved. But if there is an event that maybe you're going to have a concert or something that's open to the public, I sort of put a provision in there where I call it the anti-lock-in provision. If people are familiar with Nelson County and the large festival, if you're going to have something that's ticketed and you're issuing more than 2,000, then you've got to come to the board for a special approval. So 6 major events a year, and again, that sort of follows Graves' model, which is 6. And I like to use Graves a little bit, and I did do a little bit of analysis today. So Graves is this is just from their website. I just kind of took it just for example, 1,100 acres. Now their residential lodging structures, I counted 16, 2 of which, one has 22 rooms. And I think another one has 40 rooms. And then there are 14 cabins. I put 2.5 per bedroom. Could have someone on a fold out cot or something like that. I'm estimating that Graves can probably have 230 to 250 people on site any given time. And that's just going what's for, what's out there available publicly. It's a little different. And I made this point. Graves has been doing this since the early 60s. I don't know if we even had a building official back then. Probably didn't. If you move to Syria, Graves is there. Okay, this is something that's being introduced. Therefore, I really believe, I guess my final statement is it really needs to be something that is thought out incrementally with really clear conditions that ultimately the Plan Commission and the boarders are happy with as representatives of you, and that hopefully Barbara, Ms. Miller can live with as well. So, any questions for me?
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Let me explain to y'all exactly how the process works in the meeting, because there seems to be some confusion. Okay, after Mr. Webb finishes, the Planning Commission has the opportunity to ask questions. After that, I will ask for people from the audience that wish to make comments. The Planning Commission again, and the Board of Supervisors, if they so desire, will ask the person doing the speaking the question. In between that, there will not be any discussion or questions asked of the person doing the speaking. If you have something that's unclear, you can clear that up during your presentation or when the Board of Supervisors does their thing. And there will be another opportunity when the board and the Planning Commission meets in their joint meeting on August the 5th, I think it is, to make additional comments and ask questions. But tonight, we are going to have a very orderly process. And the way it works, as I just explained, is that the Planning Commission will first ask Mr. Webb any questions that they so desire. If they have no question, I will go to the audience and ask for anyone that wants to make a comment. You will have 3 minutes to stand up at the podium and identify yourself and address and make your comments. We have a timer over here, and after the timer goes off, you have 30 seconds to wrap it up. If we do not do that, we have a lot of people here tonight. We will be here until 12 o'clock tonight, listening to everyone make their comments. Everybody understand? In between, the person doing the speaking from the audience will address the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors, not other members in the audience. And there will be no questions from the audience at that time. All right? Any questions from the Planning Commission or the Board of Supervisors from Mr. Webb?
Yes, sir. Peter?
Pete?
Like, on the subject of transferability, reading your write-up, hearing your comments, would suggest that there are really only two rivers. One is running the special use permit runs with the land. The other alternative is runs with the applicant. And ceases if the applicant transfers property. I wonder if there isn't a hybrid on it first. That is to say, the special use permit would run with the land, and I certainly recognize the standpoint of financing and so forth, but that's important. But if a new operator of events were to come in, they might have an entirely different approach to this property that should be dealt with. My suggestion is that we agree to have the special use permit brought to the board, but require a new conditions letter from any purchaser of the property. Thinking about it, I don't know any legal bar to that. Our county attorney may suggest that there is a bar, but I think that's entirely feasible.
Yeah, well, just to be clear, if someone did, it's a good,
Excuse me, just Mr. Webb, just a second. Anyone out there outside that would like to come in, I'll ask again. We have seats in here. If anyone out there would like to come in and sit down.
someone can sit here too. I will say, to be clear, if this was to be transferred, they would be bound.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry, go
They would
ahead.
be bound to the conditions that were approved by the board. So it would be transferable, but they just couldn't say, well, you know, we want to do 60 cabins. They would have to come back and have this public hearing all over again. So they would inherit what was approved and nothing different. Now, as far as a hybrid, Sean, I didn't quite totally understand what the hybrid approach would be, but I mean,
the hybrid part would be that the SUP runs with the land, but the conditions letter is not run with the SUP. That a new conditions letter could be required to account for whatever new approach a transferee had.
But if the transferee had a new approach, then they would just have to come back through this process. So if they say, look, we want to change this, then I would say, okay, put that in the paper. What do you want to change? We move forward. I mean, we could make a statement to that effect. They would, but yeah, I just thinking right here, I'm having a hard time finding a middle ground. If they want to change anything of substance, they will need to come back to the board.
Mr. Elliott?
Chairman, I'd like to ask the county attorney something. Sean, if a motion is made, and when the motion is made for this, if this is approved, motion made to approve. Part of that motion could be that this application, if it is transferred to someone else, could only be done what's in the application now, and anything new would have to come back in front of this board. That'd be part of the motion.
That is correct.
That would take care of the problem.
Well,
Would it have to be part of the motion, or is that standard practice that they would have to come back anyhow?
They would typically, if anybody is exceeding the scope of a special use permit, they are reapplying for a special use permit.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I would go a little further, unless there's some legal bar that, Ms. Miller has described to us what seems to be a plan of action that focuses on agricultural interests. Pick the pumpkin picking, berry picking, learning about agriculture, and that sort of thing. It's very consistent with Madison County. But a purchaser came in, and its interest was musical events. That would be an entirely different kettle of fish than Ms. Miller has proposed. And that's why I say, I think we ought to explore the possibility of having the SUP run with the land, but not the conditions. Separate out the conditions.
Thank you.
I'm just having, I'll have to talk to Sean about it. I'm just having a
Okay.
hard time with
All right.
that. And again, I think it's a fine question. The SUP is the conditions, in my opinion. I mean, that is the SUP, all your conditions.
And
Um,
in that regard, I tend to agree with Mr. Webb. Mr. Worth, if you want to send me a little more detail of that, we'll give them themselves.
Any other questions from the planning commission? Mr. Carpenter?
One quick, kind of practical question. You were expressing some concern about the number of units versus the number of people staying. How many of her units are glamping sites and camping sites? And
I can't hear.
Yeah, how many, the question is, how many are glamping sites, which is, camp type sites, and how many are sort of like regular cabins?
might have more people than.
I think we have about 14, 15 glamping sites. Is that what I'm?
No, there's more glamping sites than there are cabins. There's much fewer cabins.
Oh, okay. Look at this, if you look at the site plan,
Well, my point is, if I understand it, a glamping site or even a cabin might legitimately have 5 people staying there. Whereas a lodge or hotel, that might account for some of the problem with the number of people.
right. Every structure will have to be approved by the building official, even glamping site. And it will have an occupancy. And I've talked to Mr. Wilkes about this, so we've had a long conversation about, and with the Millers here. So they understand that it's going to, whatever they propose, we have to talk to them. If they don't already have the Virginia Uniform Building Code approval, we'll have to get the plans, and Jamie has to say, yes, this meets the.
Yeah.
My point was that accounts for some of the apparent discrepancy.
It can be done, absolutely. I mean, of course, Graves has 2 large structures. But outside of those 2 structures, they're pretty much single family cabins.
Any other questions from the planning commission? Mr. Work?
Lincoln, you, in your initial presentation, you really didn't address what I think is at the heart of people's concern. That's the noise question. Would you address that.
Yeah, I said, I'll talk about noise, traffic, and environmental concerns. I mean, the noise, to me, I would approach it as a clear cutoff time. I'm not and people mentioned that we don't have a noise ordinance. Well, this is the time we can develop one for this permit. And a lot of communities don't. I mean, it's not uncommon. I think the decimals, kind of go off site to measure decimals. I just think you have a clear cutoff time. And I think I made a recommendation. There could be some flexibility, and maybe it cuts off earlier Monday through Thursday. Maybe on Friday and Saturday it goes a little later. So that's something that we can talk about tonight and next week, coming weeks. Traffic, I did do the traffic count. I looked at the traffic counts. I talked to the assistant resident engineer, Mr. Moore, today, because since he first looked at the project, there has been potentially increase of overnight guests. He still has the same position that at the site plan, when that comes in, they will, they very well might want to see an overall site traffic impact analysis study where you have an engineer and you look at the total build out and analyze what would be the traffic to and from this type of event. Now, traffic engineering, there's a little bit of, I call it voodoo in it. It's not always exact. It's pretty good. We have a lot of traffic counts, and they know what tourism, what lodges that through traffic studies generate. But his feeling at the final analysis, the only off-site improvements will be right there at the intersection. At some point, a left turn lane, a right turn lane. I mean, there's really going to be no other improvements outside of that. So we need a traffic impact analysis when we basically know this is what's pretty much going to be needed. That's turn lanes. But we did have that conversation today, and he clearly told me that 231 is at 1,440 trips a day compared to some other surrounding roads. It does, it is a, Orange Road. It's in the packet, but Orange Road, similar design, similar width, everything, and it has several thousand, I forget off the top of my head, but there are several thousand more trips on Orange Road, just for example. So again, just from an engineering perspective, it's definitely probably one of the better spots from existing conditions of the road. Environmental concerns, septic, well, that is a health department function. I estimated, based on what I've saw, you might need a dozen septic systems out there. These all have to be designed by an engineer, approved by the health department. The capacity, is one going to serve, and the size of your buildings are going to, your lodging and your buildings are going to dictate the size of the septic systems. I mean, you could be looking at $500,000 in septic systems. I mean, it's no question. Erosion, sediment, those are functions of the county that if it's over a certain size, when we get the site plan, that'll be farmed out to DEQ for stormwater, and the erosion sediment plans, which are for construction. So when you're construction, you have to have erosion sediment plan, but the post is a stormwater plan. There's a high level of review of that, and we know that, from other projects. So this is the big picture for the project, and the good news is that with having to come back with a site plan, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to see what kind of performance we have going on and how, certain things are being met. And you get, if it's approved, you get ample more opportunities to analyze this project for all three, noise, traffic, environmental concerns. But as far as the noise, that's what you're for. I mean, I sort of like the idea of a limit, and maybe you could even say certain times a year you can do it. You can have later, whatever that time may be. Is it 11 o'clock? I don't know. But during certain months of the year, you can go a little later, but not. So there's several ways in which this could be approached.
Thank you. Any more questions from the Planning Commission? I would just like to mention that that we have received numerous letters or several letters from the public on this issue. I will not read each one of them into the record tonight, but we do have the letters, and all the members of the Planning Commission have those letters, and we are reviewing them and taking it to heart, and all the comments that have been submitted. If there are no more questions from the Planning Commission, I'm going to go to the office. Go to the audience. Mr. Graves, would you like to have something to say? I see you got something there in your hand.
It's going to be.
You're Mr. Jimmy Graves, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Sound is going to be dependent on the night times. You got some nights that the sound is going to travel. It's going to travel distance. And then other nights you got to keep it down. We've tried to keep ours down at least under 11, and then try to even come on some nights we try to come down under 10 o'clock at night, because it will travel, and you will have people that will call and complain because it can travel. With us, it's coming out of the mountains, so it's going to bounce off and it's going to come further down. And so you're going to have that. And then it depends on what you're going to do. It's like when we have the different festivals, then you're going to have traffic. And when you get off of 231 onto 670, then I try to divert the traffic to go two different ways. I try to go on 600 and I try to go 670. Bring it in at the Trout Pond and bring it in at the front, so that way we can get the cars off the road.
Okay, Mr. Graves is the owner and operator of the Graves Mountain Lodge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So they have very large events up there, so he is very familiar with a lot of things that will be discussed here tonight.
If you have questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any question?
And the family's we've been in the business since they put the turnpike in. We had the order. That's when we got started. We had the ordinary where we put a team of horses onto the stagecoach, fed people and put them up overnight. And when we changed that, then we went to our house at where I live in now, and we would have 35 people staying there, and we only had 2 bathrooms at the time. And we had an outhouse. So you've changed over the years and having people, and then built 2 motels. When we bought the Christian Center, then we picked up another motel. So sewer is going to be a big problem when you have motels and have cottages and things, and you got to have large areas for drain fields. That's going to be one of the big things, because the health department, we have had to move 3 times. They decided, hey, you got putting something else in, you need something bigger. So those are things that you have to do as you go along. Depends on how much you build. If we build it all at one time, that's fine, if you got the money to do it. But we've done ours in stages. So and what we have 3 motel rooms, and 3 motels that was, and then we got 53 cottages. So got those scattered all through the mountains. The cottages are as much as 5 miles apart. So we go from Crigglesville all the way to the end of the road, 670. So scattered out through the mountains. So it depends on what you're going to do. We're doing the farm things. We're doing the apples. We're doing the pumpkins, and we're doing the hay rides and all kinds of things. And we don't know what we're going to be doing this year. We're waiting on the governor to tell us what we can do. Each phase of it has been canceled so far.
The police department comes up, and sheriff's office and fire and rescue come up, and they talk, and they generate money from that.
Yes, sir. They get the money from parking. The rescue squad and the fire company split that up. And that can go anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000. They will collect on that.
You just talking about one event?
One event.
Thank you.
And so when they help on it, on the parking, get the different groups to help them and then they get the money from it.
Okay, any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Graves, appreciate it. Anyone else like to stand up and speak? If so, please stand up, approach the mic, and identify yourself. The lady back there jumped up first.
Thank you, Chairman Jackson and Mr. Moscow, for the opportunity to represent Madison Matters.
And what is your name, please?
My name is Jane Hammond.
Thank you.
And I live in Rochelle. Madison Matters is a group of concerned citizens and taxpayers from Madison, Orange, and Greene counties. Over the past several weeks, we have requested the opportunity to dialogue with the county planner and the developer over the conditions of the SUP. We have been denied that opportunity and trust that today the commission at large will consider the modifications made in the 5-page letter we submitted on July 9th. We respectfully ask that you consider these modifications as you deliberate tonight. We want to express our grave concern about the Cressier Resort proposed for a farm near Rochelle. If the resort is established in a way that the developer hopes, it will represent a gross violation of the first goal of the Madison County Comprehensive Plan to preserve the county's rural character. Moreover, the resort as proposed would cause harm to those living nearby. The resort requires the approval of a special use permit, which the Board of Supervisors plan to vote on at its meeting on August 5th. As of now, the SUP would allow lodging at Cressier for at least 225 people overnight. That's the same capacity as many hotels. Under the SUP, at least 60,000 square feet of new structures would be built: spa, restaurant, event center, etc. The SUP would allow Cressier to hold an unlimited number of private events with unlimited attendees. It would allow an unlimited number of minor private events expected to have no more than 750 attendees, but with no strict limit. It would allow 6 major public events with up to 2,000 attendees. And with permission of the Board of Supervisors, the resort could hold more such events with an increased number of attendees. The SUP would allow outdoor amplified music to be played until midnight at any volume 365 days of the year. The SUP would run with the land so that any future buyer would be able to exploit its terms. With Cressier, agricultural land would be turned over to non-rural, non-agricultural pursuits, such as lodging, weddings, spa treatments, dining, vacation outright. We believe that if the proper environmental studies were performed and